Hi guys, it's John from John's Corner. Thanks for watching this video. Welcome to episode 5 from my series for air cadets. In this episode, I'm going to show you famous World War II aircraft. Let's get started. Okay, so we have 5 categories of airplanes in this presentation. Number 1 is fighter airplanes, which are used by the Air Force. Number 2 are naval fighters, which are used by the Navy, and some of them can be flown off aircraft carriers. Number 3, we have heavy fighters, which are usually just fighters they're heavier, they can carry more payload and have more engines. Number 4 is bombers, which are used to carry heavy payloads and bombs and drop them on enemies. And we have jet-powered fighters, which are fighter aircraft powered by jet engines. Now, World War II was the first war where jet-powered fighters were used against each other. First, we have fighters. So, the first plane we have here is the North American P-51 Mustang. Now, this is probably one of the most iconic airplanes of World War II. It was used by the U.S. Air Force as an escort fighter for bombers and as a general air-to-air fighter or air-to-ground fighter. Next we have the Supermarine Spitfire, which is another very famous airplane. This was used by the British Air Force and was used for mainly the same roles as the P-51 Mustang. Here we have the Messerschmitt BF110, which is essentially the German equivalent of the Supermarine Spitfire and the P-51 Mustang. Next we have the Hawker Hurricane, which is probably one of the unsung heroes in World War II. This plane was credited with the most planes shot down in the Battle of Britain. So this is a British fighter aircraft, and it was used for the same tasks as the P-51 Mustang, the Spitfire, and the Messerschmitt BF109. Next we have the Yakovlev Yak-9, or 3, Yak-3, which was used by the Russian Air Force and is equivalent to all the other airplanes I've talked about before. Here we have the Focke-Wulf FW-190. This plane was used for ground attack and air-to-air. This is a German plane. Next we have the Republic P-47 Thunderbolt. This is the American equivalent to the Focke-Wulf FW-190. Next we have naval fighters. So these planes are almost equivalent to fighter aircraft, except they were designed to be used by navies. First we have the Grumman F4F Wildcat. Now this is an American plane that was introduced pretty early into the war and was mostly used in the Pacific segment of the war against Japan. Next we have the Grumman F6F Hellcat, which was the replacement for the F4F Wildcat and was one of the best planes in the Pacific theater. Next we have the Mitsubishi A6M0, which was used by the Japanese Navy. Now this is what was fighting against the F4F Wildcat and the F6F Hellcat, and it was credited with supreme maneuverability but it had some flaws, i.e. it didn't have self-sealing fuel tanks and it had very little pilot armor. Next we have the Vought F4U Corsair, which is used by the American Navy and is arguably one of the best airplanes used in the Pacific theater. This plane was so good that it was used in the Korean War and stayed into service long after World War II. We have heavy fighters. Now, heavy fighters they're fighters, but they're fighter aircraft, but they are designed to carry more payload and They can carry bombs, and they're usually used for ground attack. But most of them, as you'll see, have two engines for greater thrust because they are heavier airplanes. First, we have the Lockheed P38 Lightning. Now, this plane was introduced pretty early into the war and had great success in both the European theater and the Pacific theater. So it was used against the Japanese and the Germans in World War II. And it was used by the Americans as a ground attack and air-to-air aircraft. Next we have the de Havilland Mosquito, which is kind of like the British equivalent of the P-38 Lightning. So this was used for aerial reconnaissance, bombing, and fighting. Now, a cool thing about the de Havilland Mosquito is that it was almost exclusively made of wood. Next we have the Messerschmitt BF110. Now this is just almost the German equivalent of the other planes and was used for bombing, night fighting, reconnaissance, and heavy fighter duties. Next we have bombers. Now bombers, as their name implies, are used to carry bombs. So they would carry bombs inside their payload or outside on the wing and would drop them on enemy cities. Now, bombers, they were big and slow, so they were vulnerable to anti-aircraft fire and enemy airplanes. So most bombers were accompanied by a fighter aircraft. Now, this one is pretty cool. This is a captured B17 Flying Fortress. This is an American plane that was captured by Japan, and they are studying it, and they put their own livery on it. Okay, first we have the Heinkel He-111. Now this was the main German bomber in World War II, and it's pretty cool. As you can see, it doesn't actually have a nose. The whole cockpit is actually the nose. So this was great for seeing where the bombs are going, and as you can see, there's a couple of different gunning places. So people would sit here. There's machine guns up here, here, and in the back. And people would sit here, and if enemy aircraft tried to fire upon them, they would fire back. Next we have the Boeing B17 Flying Fortress. This is an American bomber, and it is one of the most well-known bombers of World War II. So it had a huge bomb payload for the time, and as you can see, this has a lot more gunning areas. You have one here in the back, you have one here on the bottom, you might have one here, I'm not sure. There is one here, and here on the nose. And they had a glass bubble nose, so the bomber could see where to aim the bombs. Next we have the Avro Lancaster, which is the British equivalent of the B-17 and the Heinkel He-111. So you have your gunning ports here, and it held a lot of bombs for the time. Next we have jet fighters. So jet technology was relatively new during World War II, and the Germans were the first country to actually start to use them in their military aircraft. They were the first to recognize how important they were. This is an early Me-262A undergoing maintenance on a German airfield. So first we have the German Messerschmitt Me-262. So this was the first jet-powered fighter aircraft ever used in battle. So you have two jet engines here, and you have 4 machine guns in the front, and it can only seat 1 passenger. It was used for night fighter, reconnaissance, dropping bombs, and fighting, air-to-air fighting. Next we have the Messerschmitt Me-163. Now this is another German plane, but instead of having a jet engine, it actually had a rocket engine. And as you can see, it does not have horizontal stabilizers. They are built into the wings. So this is one of the first airplanes to utilize rocket power and have no rear tailplanes. So, rocket engine. A fun fact, this thing couldn't actually land with wheels. When it was taking off, it actually had a dolly, and it would ride along that until it took off, and then the dolly would it would fall off. And for landing, you had a retractable ski, and then you would retract that and then land on the runway. Next, we have the Gloucester Meteor. Now, this is the first jet-powered aircraft that was used by the Allies, and the only plane that was used by the Allies during World War II. So, as you can see, it's similar to the Me-262, 2 turbojet engines, 4 machine guns, 2 on this side, 2 on the other, 1 pilot, and it was used for the same tasks as the Me-262. I forgot to mention, this was used by the British Air Force during World War II. Alright guys, that's it. I hope you found this video useful. Please like this video and subscribe to my channel. Bye.